Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to continue our discussion with mental illnesses in fiction, and we're going to move into the addictions and substance abuse disorders. This is an area that I am an expert on. There's a piece of paper on the wall behind me that says so I'll just go with that. But yeah, what I'm going to do is talk about addictions in general, move into a little bit of the different forms of addiction, and then probably these will be separate videos, but talk a little bit about the specific addictions, particularly the specific substances, because they are different. They all kind of get lumped into one category, but they are really very different. The way they interact with the person is very different, and so we kind of need to separate those out. Um, but yeah, let's start by talking about what is an addiction first. And in the broadest sense, what an addiction is the continuation of a behavior despite significant negative consequences. So there's a few things to this. One, it's a behavior. So you have to be doing something to be an addiction. A thought is not an addiction. A feeling is not an addiction. You'll sometimes hear people talk about love addiction. That's, you know, it's really more what they're trying to describe is the notion of getting in and out of relationships. Sometimes what they're really describing is sex addiction, people who have a compulsive need to have sex, for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of things to that, but yeah, an addiction is a behavior. It's something that you do. And it's continuing, it's ongoing. Just because you drank a lot on Friday night and you kind of blacked out and you don't remember what happened, doesn't necessarily mean that you're an addict. Now, if you do that every weekend, every night, more often than not, then yeah, you probably are in the addiction territory. And the reason why I say that is because you can't do that sort of thing without also having significant negative consequences. And that, of course, a loaded term too. What are negative consequences? Well, it kind of depends on the addiction. Like someone who's sex addiction, well, they could be contracting a sexual disease. They could be an STD. They could be cheating on their spouse, and it's putting their relationships in danger. They could be putting themselves physically in danger. There's a lot of things like that, significant consequences. With alcohol, it's the same sort of thing. There's health reasons. There's maybe criminal prosecutions. It jeopardizes your job, jeopardizes school, your relationship. These sort of things. These are the sort of things that we're usually looking at when we talk about negative consequences, and they have to be bad enough to be considered significant. If you're a college student and you go out and you party on a Thursday night and you skip your classes on Friday, again, if you do it once, that's probably not constituting an addiction. Now, if you're going out and partying and skipping classes so much to the point that you're in jeopardy and getting Fs and getting kicked out of school, then yeah, because now it's impacting your school. And so you see what it's getting at? Also, when we talk about addictions, it's not really a question of amount. That's what a lot of people will think when I talk about, mainly especially with substance abuse, is when somebody goes, well, I only drink a 6-pack a night. I can't be an alcoholic, because alcoholics drink a case of beer, right? And really, that has nothing to do with it, nothing at all. If a person drinks one beer a week, but that beer is enough to cause them significant negative consequences, and they keep doing it anyway, they would constitute as having an addiction, even though it's just one beer a week. I don't think anyone would consider that excessive, but maybe they live in a culture where any amount of alcohol is considered too much and it causes social issues. Maybe they have a significant health problem, and that one beer a week is enough to maybe kill them or something. Whatever. There's lots of things that can go into it. Criminal problems. They're not allowed to use alcohol or drugs of any kind, and because they keep drinking a beer a week, that's enough for them to, get in trouble with their probation officer or something else like that. So that's what we mean, is it's something that you're doing. So it's not necessarily something that you're feeling or something that you're thinking. You have to do it a lot, or you have to do it, well, I should say continual, a lot even, it depends. Someone would say, oh, I don't drink that much. But when they go out and drink, they get blitzed and hammered, and they go out and drink and they do that once a week, maybe twice a month, that can still be enough. That's why a lot of times when I'm assessing someone for their substance abuse, I ask, with alcohol, for instance, I ask, how much and how often do you drink? Because how much doesn't tell me anything. They may have gotten completely hammered last night, and that's the first time they've had alcohol in a year, and maybe the last time they have it in a year. So I don't know if that's that often, how often they do that. And then also how much. A lot of people say, well, I only drink socially. Like how often is that? Oh, I can go out with friends and stuff. Okay, yeah. But it turns out every time they go out, they get blackout drunk and bad stuff happens and that sort of thing. So how much and how often is important. And I try and get as specific as I can. And that's always kind of on the tricky side too, because if a client can't tell me how much and how often they drink, that could mean that they do it so infrequently that they genuinely don't remember. Like for me, I think I had a glass of wine 2 weeks ago, maybe. I don't drink very often. I don't like alcohol. I don't like being drunk. So I know I did not drink enough to get drunk because I don't like being drunk. So at most, I had maybe 2, maybe 3 glasses of wine. That's a lot for me, actually. And it wasn't last weekend. Maybe it was the weekend before. I don't know. So you see, that's the problem. Is if someone asked me how much and how often you drink, I'd be very vague. But on the other end of that spectrum is some people drink so much and so often that they literally don't remember. And that kind of brings me to my next point, is that at the root of a lot of addictions, or actually I'd say the root of all addictions, is deception. The addict first lies to themselves. They make up these sort of lies to themselves. I always like to couch it as their addiction lies to them. And that's maybe another topic for another time. But they first lie to themselves. They say things like, it's no big deal, I'm not hurting anybody, I can quit whenever I want, this will be the last time, this time will be different, no one has to know, it's no one else's business, I'm not bothering anyone else, I need this, I want this, I deserve this, these sort of things. This is the kind of lies that addiction tells us to make it okay to do the thing, despite the negative consequences, right? Because this is how you first have to maintain it. As you also have to lie to yourself that the negative consequences don't exist, or if they exist, it's always for some other reason. The reason why I'm failing in school is because my professors all suck and they hate me. Well, no, the reason why you're not doing well in school is because you keep getting drunk and skipping class. You're not studying. My girlfriend argues with me all the time because she's a bitch. Well, maybe she is a bitch, or maybe she's also just tired of dealing with your drunk ass. That sort of thing. So the first thing that the addict does is lie to themselves. And then turning around and lying to others is just second nature, just easy at that point. And it's almost out of reflex. I have one client right now who is a particularly tough nut to crack, and mainly because I don't think he wants to be cracked. I don't think he really wants to get sober. In fact, I know he doesn't want to get sober. He told me he didn't want to get sober. What he wants is his wife to shut up about it. So, not a good prospect for him. But yeah, he lies just out of reflex. And it's only through talking to him more that, he can't maintain the lie very well, and so all these other little drips and drabs. And so I have to be like a little bit of an investigator, which I don't really like being. Well, I do, but I like being an investigator or a counselor. And when I have to wear both hats, it's kind of uncomfortable. But with some folks with addictions, you kind of have to be. You have to start reading between the lines and start to second guess. And even then, it's a little tricky because in counseling, only with addictions are we told to just assume that our clients are lying. It's an interesting prospect, that. if a client came into my office and said I was sexually abused as a child, I would immediately go, oh, that's horrible. That's not your fault. Let's work on this. It'd be totally, totally on you. If somebody says, oh, my wife is so mean to me, I would say, yeah, she probably is. There's probably some stress in the marriage. Let's talk through it and work it out. And if someone says, oh, I'm not alcoholic, I don't drink, it's like, well, yeah, really? We're even taught, like, when someone tells you how much they drink, just multiply it by 3 or 4 or 5. The number always changes. But it's always this assumption that people drink more than they really do, and that's really... I think some of this comes maybe from an AA background. Again, that's a whole nother topic. Maybe I will talk about that one later, just because it's so big in the addictions world that it might come up. And so, yeah, that's one of the hard parts. Is deception is always at the root of addictions. Another thing on addictions is, going back to the behaviors thing, is it's not always substance abuse. Notice that I talked about sex addiction as well. You might have heard of like video game addiction or porn addiction, exercise addiction. We sometimes call those process addictions. And I'll probably just talk about those here because they're kind of straightforward. Process addictions are behaviors that people do. They're not necessarily compulsions. They could quit. Maybe they even want to quit. They just don't quit for some reason. This is again kind of unlike the obsessive compulsive disorder, where they feel compelled to do this sort of thing. It's almost as if someone is taking over their head and they have to do these things. Whereas the addict is making the choice to sit down and load up Pornhub and spend 2 hours, jerking off the videos. But process addiction is different than substance abuse, mainly because of the impact it has on the body. When you smoke weed, or you drink alcohol, or you snort coke, or whatever it is that you're doing, you are putting a chemical in your body, and at that point, the chemical is now kind of driving the show. It's going to have a physiological reaction that you really can't stop. Whereas process addictions aren't necessarily that strong. Again, it gets kind of weird because porn addiction changes the hormones in your body. There's a dopamine hit and that sort of thing. So that can be thought of as a substance abuse. We also talk about exercise addiction that has the same sort of thing. It changes the physiology of your body. I think the difference is those are not something you're putting into your body. You're just sort of doing to make your body feel different, as opposed to like you take a pill and it changes your body. Then we get to another weird one, which is food addiction. And we don't really call food addiction as much. We usually call it binge eating because that's a little more like it. And I think it is safe to kind of consider binge eating as sort of like an addiction. But I think what I'm going to do is save that and talk more about that when we get into eating disorders, because that's how we usually talk about it. But just to let you know, when I work with someone with a binge eating disorder, I work with them as if they are an addict. I should probably talk about how to treat addicts too. So yeah, with process addictions, what I'm usually looking at is the client is doing something to avoid how they're feeling. And actually, this is true for substance abuses too. They don't like how they're feeling. They don't like how they're thinking, and they want to change that, or at least numb out to where they don't feel it that way anymore. So someone who spends all his time playing video games, in a way, is trying to distract themselves from reality. You could argue, this is a writing channel, interestingly, you could argue that reading can be an addiction. We don't think of it in those terms because we like reading. Culturally, we like reading. So if someone reads a lot, we don't think, oh, wow, they're just trying to avoid reality or whatever else. But video games, porn is kind of in that realm as well. But also with the substance abuse things as well. People drink and alcohol, weed, and heroin, which I'll talk more about in other videos. They basically let you numb out to where you just don't feel anything. Whereas the other stimulants like meth, crack, coke, all the hallucinogens, they can change how you feel, and that lets people feel those sort of things. Although ketamine is a hallucinogen or psychedelic, and it just makes you numb out as well. So again, very complicated if you haven't picked up on that yet. So with the process addictions, that's usually what we're talking about, is someone who's just trying to plug in and avoid reality, avoid how they're feeling, avoid how they're thinking, avoid working on any aspect of their life because they just don't like it, and usually because they also don't know what to do. And that's what we do in counseling. Is what I do with clients with addictions is I try to figure out, what is the addiction doing? How does it serve you? Which usually blows people's mind, because when they show up to my office, they usually, all they can do is list all the ways in which it's destroying their life, which is why they want to change, which is good. But we also need to look at, in what way is it serving you, or has it served you in the past? Because that reason is usually still there. Someone is, like we talked about PTSD, someone is drinking because they want to forget about the trauma that they suffered when they were younger. Well, the trauma that they suffered from is still there. The memories are still there. The PTSD is still there. It's just now we've got this like alcohol or weed issue on top of it, and we got to get rid of that. Well, when we do that, all the other stuff comes right back up. And so we have to kind of do both at the same time, which is a tricky little dance. But once you get, it's kind of like a dance. Once you get the rhythm down, then it's very easy. But in the beginning, yeah, that's what you have to do. So addictions in fiction. If you're going to write a write a character that has an addiction, one, you have to think about what is it that they're doing. Again, what's their behavior. So this is great because in writing you can show them doing their addiction. You can show them that. You can also show how it affects their lives. And as a fiction writer, you get to do both. You can show how it impacts the people around them, how it impacts other aspects of their life, or you can also show like how it impacts how they feel and how they think as well. Way back in the day, Buffy the Vampire Slayer had a really good season where it showed Willow, who is this wizard kind of thing, witch is what they used, whom she got addicted to magic. And I thought that was great. It showed her going to some scuzzy guy's place and, getting a spell cast on her. It showed how she made poor choices afterwards and she was irresponsible. It even showed her in recovery trying to, stay sober from using magic and had to earn everybody's trust back. It was great. It was a great way of, in fiction, using addiction without actually using substances. You could do this with vampires, for instance. With vampires, it would be a little more like a food addiction because they need blood, but they don't need that much blood, right? And so some vampires tend to be gluttonous, and that sort of thing causes problems for other people. So there's lots of different things, but yeah, you do have to show that the person is doing something, they keep doing something, even though it has all these negative consequences, and then you have to show what those negative consequences are. And then also, right from, again, remember the root of all addictions is deception. And so the person will lie to themselves. They will make excuses as to why they need to do this addiction, whatever it is. And then they will turn around and lie to the people around them. And also with the lies, because this is also important too, because you might be writing from the other character's perspective. The best way to lie to someone is to tell them exactly what they want to hear. So when the wife is concerned that her husband is drinking again, he just says, "No, honey, I'm not. No, I never drink. Check out the house. Look for empty bottles," because he knows he doesn't drink at home anymore. He learned how to drink, his car out in the parking lot or something, and throws the bottles in a dumpster. But he's still drinking, but he's just figured out how to lie better, how to hide it better. And so that's the other thing is when the addict lies to other people, what they're usually doing is telling the people what they want to hear. And then the lies usually fall apart, at some point. Like I said, with my one client, in the process of an hour, I can catch him in like half a dozen lies because he's just not that good at it. Or maybe I'm a really good investigator. Whatever. So that's the notion of addictions. Like I said, that's a very broad overview. I think next time I'm going to talk more about substance abuse, particularly, not just addictions in general. I don't know if I'll go make different videos for each substance, or maybe I'll just kind of do a high-level overview of the different kinds of substances. But yeah, let me know, in the comments. Let me know if there's anything else about addictions that maybe I left out, or you'd like to know more about any particular substances that you're interested in, particular addictions that you're interested in, or maybe an approach to use to present your addiction in your fiction. But anyway, I will talk to you later and see you next time. Bye.